Hi, hello and welcome to this short webinar all about skunk. Here's what we will be covering today. First off, we're going to have a quick overview of the cannabis family. Then we're going to look at crossbreeding and hybrid plants, the emergence of skunk, and finally the myths, the media and some common misconceptions. So let's start off by taking a look at the cannabis family tree. Cannabis is usually misrepresented in quite a reductionist way, as you can see from the bottom right hand box. It is normally categorized into two categories, hemp or marijuana. Hemp has a very little THC count and a very little cannabinoid count, meaning it won't get you high. Hemp is used for its fibrous properties and can be used to make clothing, rope, concrete and many other materials. Marijuana or weed is used for its cannabinoid count and its psychoactive properties that gets you high. Marijuana is then usually subcategorized into grass or skunk, which again can be seen as a reductionist way. The citrus genus, by comparison, could be broken down for all citrus fruits to be sweet or sour. We know this not to be true, so if you look above, cannabis actually has 3 genus types, and these are indica, a shorter, bushier plant found in Central Asia. Its users say it produces a couch-lock, relaxing high, and this is usually due to its higher concentrations of CBD. We also have sativa. This is a taller, spindlier plant found in Africa, India, and the South America. It usually has a higher THC content. Hemp is a strain of sativa with a very low THC count. Finally, we have ruderalis. This is a shorter plant with very little psychoactive properties. It's used mainly now in crossbreeding and hybrid plants for its genetic stability. It grows quite quickly and is also frost resistant. This is found naturally in parts of Northern Asia, Europe, and Russia. Let's take a look at crossbreeding. The first experiment of crossbreeding was done by a man called David Watson in the 1970s. He then later went on to be known as Sam the Skunk Man. He crossbred through selective breeding Colombian Gold and Acapulco Gold, 2 landrace strains of sativa cannabis, and from this, skunk number 1 was born. An incredibly stable and potent plant, making it the perfect specimen for future crossbreeding, and many of the strains that we see today can have its genetics traced back to skunk number 1. Later on, and more recently, ruderalis is used for its growing properties, as I mentioned in the previous slide, and it's crossbred with indicas and sativas to have a desirable cannabinoid makeup. Hybrids are a mixture of indica, sativa or ruderalis plants, or 2 hybrids that have been crossbred together. This creates a new strain, and according to Leafly.com, which is a US-based cannabis database and information site, there are currently over 3,420 different strains of cannabis available. The different chemical balances of cannabinoids, terpenes and flavonoids produce different effects and are marketed as such. For example, some are marketed to increase appetite, help with sleep, pain, anxiety, or boost creativity. If you haven't had a chance to check out Leafly.com, I strongly recommend you have a little look there to further your knowledge. So what we're going to do now is have a look at some myths and misconceptions and break those down. Skunk is a generic term given for any strong or potent cannabis. So it appears that skunk has become a generic term for any potent or strong cannabis. Much like in other parts of society where we say we want a Coke when we mean a cola drink, we're going to hoover up when we mean we're going to use the vacuum cleaner, and we need some sellotape when actually we need some sticky tape. The media latched onto this term and demonized it, claiming it to be stronger, more potent or a higher THC count than regular herbal or grass cannabis. This sought to create a divide between older generations who smoked in the 70s and the 80s and the young people of today to demonize the new street weed. The term is used between users and dealers, and it was used to describe quality or high-grade cannabis, and today's equivalent could be seen as imports, fire and chronic. Imports, interestingly, has its own etymological story. And finally, using the uppercase S in the word skunk refers to specific strains such as super skunk, skunk number 1 or Hindu skunk, whereas a lowercase s for skunk means a generic phrase for any strong or potent cannabis. Study by Potter and Chapman in 2012 looked at the word skunk and when it had been used in the media. They found that the term first appeared in the early to mid 90s. This was around the time where the UK saw an increase of hobby growers beginning to grow cannabis indoors. The second and biggest peak was between 2008 and 2009. Sharply peaked around here, and this was the time when cannabis was reclassified from a Class C to a Class B substance. At this point, it's unable to determine whether the media influenced politics or vice versa. Another misconception about skunk is that it's solely grown indoors, not using soil medium. So So here we see skunk used as a term for a growing technique, meaning it's grown indoors. However, many plants, flowers and vegetables are grown indoors in controlled environments where we can control the heat, the lighting and the nutrients. By controlling these three essential elements, we can produce the most sought after crops, whether that is the brightest flowers, biggest tomatoes, crispiest lettuce or the most potent cannabis plants. Another advantage to growing indoors is that it can be more discreet and not gain any unwanted attention. By growing indoors and controlling the heat, lighting and nutrients, you can produce the most sought after crops, and this furthers the rhetoric that skunk is a stronger cannabis, where actually you are getting better results from the same cannabis plant. It is also worth noting here that growing without soil is called hydroponic or aeroponic growing, and this is where the roots are suspended in a water and nutrient mix or sprayed with a water nutrient mist in the terms of aeroponic. This has greater control on the nutrients fed to the plant, which again can have more desired outcomes for your plant. A lot of people believe it is called skunk because it stinks. Some skunkmen may have called it skunk because of its strong smells originally in the 70s compared to the other available cannabis. However, it is worth noting that in the United States, skunk has a different meaning to what it does here in the UK. In the UK, it's sort of given to any strong or potent cannabis, where in the US, it is called skunk because of the strong odours that come from the cannabis plant. Another myth that's doing the rounds is that everything is so much stronger these days. So let's break that down. Skunk, as we know it, was around in the 1970s and the 1980s, but it was much harder to source than it is nowadays, as potent cannabis seems to be becoming the norm. Alongside this, the illicit nature of the cannabis market means that consumers don't always get a choice when choosing cannabis. They're either given a limited choice or a get-what-you-given basis. On the flip side of this though, it could be that supply and demand meant that lower potency cannabis is phased out. And as we discussed earlier, by manipulating the growing environment, we can ensure higher yields and higher potency than when growing is left to Mother Nature and outdoor external factors. It is worth noticing that a study was published detailing that street weed was too strong, was funded by board members of GW Pharmaceuticals. At the time, they were developing and trialling their cannabis-based medicinal product, Epidiolex. This has further helped the rhetoric that street weed can be 10, 30 and even 100 times stronger than cannabis that was around in the 70s and the 80s. However, given that the average THC content was somewhere around 8 to 12% and today it's 14 to 25%, these figures simply do not add up. And finally, it's also worth noticing that some cannabis-based medical products and medicinal marijuana that's sold in dispensaries around USA and Canada have much higher concentrations of THC than what can be found on the streets of the UK. This is where the term imports come from, as in it's cannabis that has been imported from dispensaries in the USA or Canada, but now it's becoming a genericized term or marketed term for any strong or potent cannabis. Finally, before we finish, I'm going to draw on a parallel to the term sensimilia. Sensimilia or sinsemilla literally translates from Spanish to English as no seeds, and again this is known as a growing technique that became a genericized term. Almost all cultivated cannabis uses this technique today, and how that is done is plants are sexed and any males are removed from the growing area. If a male is present, they will fertilize the female and she will begin producing seeds. By removing the males or buying special feminized seeds, the females yearn for a male companion and concentrate producing cannabinoids in their flowering buds rather than the seeds. So again, by removing the males, we are seeing a result being more potent cannabis plants. Some links and references that I've used throughout. I would like to particularly draw your attention to leafly.com and the study by Potter and Chatwin in 2012, The Problem with Skunk, that is available online. So to conclude some of the key points and messages from today's presentation, skunk has many different definitions that originate from many different places, and these can change depending on who we're speaking to and when we spoke to them. Skunk, as we know it, originated in the 70s and is the name given to the first successful crossbred plant. Another definition is that skunk is the term that has been wrongly applied to any cannabis that's been grown indoors or using hydroponic.
Hydro is another nickname for cannabis that has grown hydroponically, and that term also has become widespread in some cases to mean any indoor grown cannabis. Skunk has also been used as a generic term for any strong, meaning high THC content cannabis. And finally, high THC cannabis that we are seeing today labelled as skunk has been around since the 70s but was harder to find. The average THC content of cannabis has only slightly increased and is not by the proportions detailed by some media outlets and some publications. Who are we behind this video? We are The Corner. We are Sheffield's young people's substance misuse and harm reduction service. We work with young people aged 10 to 18 across a range of substances. We deliver harm reduction, and we can also help people scale back, cut back and stop their use. Please check out our website www.thecornersheffield.com. I've been Brad from The Corner, part of Change Grow Live. If you've enjoyed this video, please check out our other videos, like and subscribe as well. Cheers, thanks and goodbye!